OutKick.
I think there's always going to be outside noise, but I think we've been professionals long enough to know that if you let that affect you, then you're not really here for the right things. And so for us, we just keep the main thing, and that's hoops.
You're speaking of that outside noise, Sophie, your teammate. Sophie came out with
Oh, thank you.
That was the moment the story stopped being only about basketball. A reporter started asking about Sophie Cunningham. The Fever staff cut it off, and now the question is bigger than one press conference.
We got the Indiana Fever creating yet another controversy besides what Stephanie White said last night. This is OutKick. And OutKick is saying that as they were getting ready to ask a question of Stephanie White, by the way, Caitlin Clark did not come out for reporters after her triple-double.
The Indiana Fever had just walked into another storm, and the timing is what makes this so strange. Caitlin Clark had a triple-double night, the kind of performance most leagues would turn into a full marketing campaign by sunrise. But according to the commentary in this clip, Clark did not come out to speak with reporters after the game. That matters because when a league has a player who can pull attention from outside the normal sports bubble, every post-game moment becomes part of the business. Every camera, every question, every quote, every awkward silence gets magnified. And instead of the headline being clean and simple, instead of the story being Clark's numbers, the comeback, the crowd, or the Fever's direction, the attention moved to who got to ask questions and who got shut down. And that is the first open wound in this entire controversy. Is the league trying to grow, or is it trying to control the exact type of audience allowed to watch it grow? Because those are not the same thing. Growth is messy. Growth brings new fans, new outlets, uncomfortable questions, people who were not in the room 5 years ago, and people the league might not like. But once the audience expands, you do not get to pretend the old media environment still exists. The part that should bother the Fever is not just that the clip exists. It is that the clip creates a second story that competes with their own star's performance. And later, when Stephanie White tries to explain this as outside noise and part of the league's growth, that explanation creates an even bigger problem.
Kick.
I think there's always going to be outside noise, but I think we've been professionals long enough to know that if you let that affect you, then you're not really here for the right things. And so for us, we just keep the main thing, and that's hoops.
You're speaking of that outside noise, Sophie, your teammate. Sophie came out with
Oh, thank you. Have a good day.
Wow. I was going to bet all the money in the world that it was this old gal right here on the left that follows everybody around that shut this thing down. You created another controversy. Yeah, shutting down this press conference because OutKick was not your chosen, approved WNBA media.
That ending is the whole controversy in about 14 seconds. A question begins. The words, "speaking of that outside noise," are barely out. Sophie Cunningham's name comes up. Then the press conference is done. Now, to be fair, teams end press conferences all the time. Sometimes players have to leave. Sometimes staff are managing time. Sometimes the room is chaotic. But when the shutdown happens, right as a sensitive question begins, people are not going to believe it was random. They are going to connect the dots, especially when this is already attached to a larger debate around Sophie, women's sports, and what kind of voices the WNBA wants near its product. That is why this clip is dangerous for the league's image. It does not need a conspiracy theory to hurt them. It only needs the appearance of avoidance. And when fans already believe certain outlets get iced out while friendly outlets get access, a moment like this becomes evidence in their minds, even if the team would argue it was just timing. The bigger issue is trust. If fans believe the league only wants questions from approved voices, then every press conference starts looking like a performance. Every answer sounds managed. Every silence sounds political. And for a league that has been fighting for legitimacy, visibility, and mainstream attention, that is a problem they created for themselves. Because the WNBA cannot ask for national coverage and then act shocked when national coverage comes with national-level scrutiny. You cannot celebrate when the cameras show up for the highlights, then get nervous when those same cameras ask about controversy. That is not how major sports work.
The Fever coach Stephanie White has asked her stance on males playing in women's sports.
What's your stance? What is your stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports? What's your personal stance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that, like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels.
This is where Stephanie White steps into the center of the storm. The question was direct. The reporter asked for her stance on athletes who test as biologically male participating in women's sports. White did not give a yes or no answer. She said she was not educated enough from a scientific standpoint. And then she said she does not believe exclusion is the answer. That answer was careful. It was also guaranteed to make both sides angry. For people who support strict sex-based categories in women's sports, the response sounds like a dodge. They hear "not educated enough" and think, how can a professional women's basketball coach not have a position on the category her league is built around? For people who support broader inclusion policies, the answer may sound like White was trying to avoid being dragged into a political trap, while still signaling that she does not want exclusion as the starting point. That is the tension. This is not a normal post-game question about rebounding, rotations, or late clock execution. It is a cultural question placed inside a sports setting, and White tried to escape the binary. But in the current climate, escaping the binary often looks like refusing to answer. And the reason this blew up is simple. Women's sports is not an abstract debate inside the WNBA. The product is literally organized around a protected women's category. Fans who care about fairness see that category as the foundation. Fans who care about inclusion see blanket exclusion as cruel or overly simplistic. White's answer attempted to live somewhere in the middle, but the middle is exactly where people get attacked from both sides.
So
There
you
were girl sports.
would you welcome a biological male in WNBA?
Again, it's like, I don't know, when we talk about biological male and scientifically where we are, I think it's a totally different scenario. As I said, I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart answer. I would say, though, that I just don't feel like exclusion is an answer, and I think that we need to have deeper, more layered conversations.
And you'd be okay with them in the locker room?
The follow-up made it even tighter. The reporter pushed again, asking whether White would welcome a biologically male athlete in the WNBA. White again declined to answer directly, saying she was not educated enough on transgender athletes and transition to give a smart answer. Then she repeated the larger principle. She does not feel exclusion is the answer, and she wants deeper, more layered conversations. That phrase sounds reasonable in a corporate setting. Deeper conversation is the kind of answer organizations use when they want time, nuance, and distance from a headline. But the problem is that sports categories do not operate on vague nuance in real time. Someone either qualifies or they do not. Someone is either eligible under a league policy or they are not. A locker room either has rules or it does not. Competition either has boundaries or it does not. That is why her answer became the story. Not because every coach is expected to produce a medical white paper at a microphone, but because fans heard uncertainty on an issue they believe should have a clear answer. And once that happens, the performance on the floor gets swallowed by the politics around the floor. There is also a strategic layer here. The Fever have Caitlin Clark, the biggest attention magnet in the league. They have Sophie Cunningham, who has become a magnet for a totally different kind of attention. They have Stephanie White, who is now being asked questions that go far beyond basketball. That combination creates a media environment where every answer can become a headline, and every non-answer can become an even bigger headline. This is the trap the Fever are in. If they answer, they risk alienating one side. If they avoid, they look afraid. If they shut down questions, they look controlling. And if they keep saying the league is growing, people will keep asking what kind of growth they actually want.
Is there any frustration, because you guys are in a really fantastic run, that this is distracting from that?
There is a frustration, of course, because we want to talk about basketball and we want to continue to work on our game and we want to continue to grow as a team. But I also understand, this is part of our growth edge as a league. right? It's part of our growth edge as a league, and you know, we have to be able to manage. We have to be able to insulate as much as we can, and then we have to be able to lead with conversation.
Now listen closely to the pivot. The next question asks whether there is frustration because the team is on a strong run, and this controversy is distracting from that. White admits there is frustration because they want to talk about basketball, keep working on their game, and grow as a team. But then she says something important. She calls this part of the league's growth edge. That is the most revealing phrase in the whole sequence, because growth edge sounds like an attempt to frame controversy as a natural stage of expansion. In one sense, she is right. When a league becomes bigger, it gets louder. More people enter the conversation. More outlets show up. More cultural fights attach themselves to the product. That happens in every major sport. The NFL, NBA, college football, boxing, UFC, they all know this. Growth brings attention, and attention brings conflict. But White also says they have to insulate as much as they can. And that is where the contradiction begins. Insulate from what? From distraction? From bad faith questions? From outside political pressure? From fans who do not share the same worldview as the league's traditional media environment? That word matters because it can be interpreted two ways. Inside a locker room, insulation is normal. Coaches protect players from noise. They keep the team focused. They block distractions. Every good coach does some version of that. But outside the locker room, if insulation starts looking like selective access or shutting down unwanted questions, then it becomes something else. It becomes gatekeeping. And that is the exact debate this video is built around. The WNBA wants growth. The Fever want focus. Reporters want answers. Fans want transparency. But those goals are colliding in public, and every side thinks the other side is acting in bad faith.
He asked you point blank, biological males should be allowed in the WNBA, yes or no? You gave a bullshit coward answer. A cowardly answer.
This is where the commentary gets much sharper, because the criticism is not just that White gave a careful answer. The criticism is that she was asked a point-blank eligibility question and chose not to give a point-blank response. The strongest version of that criticism is this. Women's sports exists because categories matter. Height categories do not exist in basketball, but weight classes exist in combat sports. Age divisions exist in youth sports. Paralympic classifications exist because different competitive conditions matter. So when someone says they do not believe exclusion is the answer, critics respond by saying that every sports category is, by design, a form of exclusion. That argument lands with a lot of viewers because it takes the debate out of slogans and puts it into structure. The question becomes, what is the category for? If the category is women's basketball, then what are the boundaries that protect it? If the answer is always more conversation, fans who are worried about fairness hear that as no boundary at all. But the other side would argue that eligibility rules are complicated, that medical history, transition status, hormone policy, youth participation, and elite professional standards are not all the same conversation. They would say a coach should not be forced into a yes or no answer on a complicated policy question at a post-game media availability. Both arguments can exist at the same time. But for retention, for the story, and for the league's image, one thing is clear. White's answer did not close the controversy. It widened it. And that is why the clip traveled.
Samara.
What's your stance on athletes who are biologically male participating in women's sports?
Yeah, I mean, my focus as a basketball coach, I'd be completely honest, like I don't think I've ever had to think about that. I'm completely supportive of people from all communities, all walks of life. So that's my stance completely. You know, I'm supportive of everyone in the Portland, you know, the community.
Would you be okay with biological males participating in the WNBA?
I think I've given my answer already on that question. I don't feel like I need to go.
Then Portland Fire coach Alex Sarama gets asked essentially the same question, and his response shows how coaches are trying to survive these moments. He says his focus is basketball. He says he has not really had to think about it. He says he supports people from all communities in Portland. Then, when asked directly whether he would be okay with biologically male athletes in the WNBA, he says he is comfortable with the answer he already gave. That is not an accidental answer. That is a coach trying not to become the story. And honestly, that tells you how radioactive this topic has become inside the league. Coaches know one sentence can follow them for years. They know a clip can be cut, framed, uploaded, debated, and thrown back at them every time their team loses. So they default to the safest language possible: support everyone, focus on basketball, no need to go further. But here is the problem. Safe language does not always feel safe to the audience. Sometimes it feels evasive. Sometimes it feels like the league's leaders are speaking in a code where every word is designed not to offend sponsors, not to anger activists, not to upset players, not to ignite media backlash, and not to answer the question. That is why the public reaction is so intense. People are not only reacting to the policy debate, they are reacting to the feeling that nobody in authority wants to say anything clearly. And when clarity disappears, suspicion fills the space. The league may think silence protects it, but in the internet era, silence becomes content. A clipped answer becomes content. A press conference ending becomes content. A coach saying, "I already answered," becomes content. And once the story leaves the arena, the league no longer controls the frame.
Quote, I don't ever believe exclusion is the answer. Cool, so you think Olympians should be excluded from Paralympics? 18-year-olds should be excluded from 12U heavyweights? Shouldn't be excluded from featherweights? Categories exist solely to exclude. Riley Gaines.
The Riley Gaines point in the clip is blunt, but it captures the heart of the category argument. Categories exist to separate competition by relevant physical or competitive factors. That is true in many sports structures, from weight classes to age divisions to para-classifications. So when critics hear exclusion is not the answer, they respond by saying exclusion is not automatically hatred. Sometimes exclusion is the mechanism that makes a category meaningful. That is the argument Sophie Cunningham's supporters are leaning into. They are not framing this as a small policy disagreement. They are framing it as a defense of women's sports itself. Whether viewers agree or disagree, that framing is powerful because it connects the issue to fairness, opportunity, safety, scholarships, professional roster spots, and the future of girls entering the sport. And this is where Sophie becomes bigger than her stat line. She is not just being discussed as a player anymore. She is being discussed as a symbol. To her supporters, she represents a professional athlete willing to say what they believe others are afraid to say. To her critics, she may represent a political fight being dragged into a league that is trying to focus on basketball and inclusion. Either way, she has become a central figure in a cultural conflict that the WNBA cannot easily contain. That is why the boos in Portland matter. They were not just boos for a visiting player, they were a public reaction to what people think Sophie represents. And when a player becomes a symbol, every arena reaction turns into a referendum.
All right, so we're here at it's the Fever and the Fire game at the Moda Center, and these young women showed up to do what?
We showed up today here in support of Sophie Cunningham and her stance on biological men and women's sports, and being the first professional athlete to stand up and say that she doesn't think it's fair, and do it in a very respectful, kind, and loving way. So we're here to support her.
This is the other side of the arena that the broadcast does not always show. Young women showed up saying they were there to support Sophie Cunningham and to support keeping women's sports for women and girls. That is not a minor detail. That is the visual proof that this controversy is no longer only online. The league can call it outside noise, but when people are showing up at games with a message, it is inside the building. When reporters are asking coaches about it, it is inside the press room. When players are getting booed or defended because of it, it is inside the product. That is the reality of a league that has crossed into a larger cultural conversation. And this is why the Fever's handling of the press conference matters so much. If the organization believes this is a distraction, they may try to minimize it. But if fans believe this is a core issue, minimizing it looks like disrespect. That disconnect is where the anger lives. The league has to understand that new attention does not arrive politely. It arrives through controversy, star power, clips, arguments, podcasts, cable segments, social media fights, and fans who do not all think the same way. Caitlin Clark brought a massive audience. Sophie Cunningham is now resonating with another audience. Those audiences are not identical. They do not all share the same politics. They do not all trust the same media. They do not all want the same version of the WNBA. But from a business standpoint, that is exactly what growth looks like. It is not clean. It is not comfortable. It is not limited to the people who were already watching. If the WNBA wants the money, ratings, ticket sales, attention, and national conversation that come with a bigger footprint, then it also has to survive bigger disagreement.
You're shutting actual news outlets down. Indiana Fever PR. Wow. Isn't that the point of growing the league? So you get coverage from places you're not used to seeing prior. I mean, the fact that OutKick is there obviously means the audience has stretched out in some kind of way. We want to grow, but we only want to grow with a specific...
This is the payoff. The central contradiction is not simply about one question, one coach, or one media outlet. It is about a league trying to expand while still acting like it can choose the boundaries of the conversation. The commentary says the presence of OutKick at the game proves the audience has stretched in some way. That is a fair observation. Whether someone likes that outlet or hates that outlet, its presence signals that the WNBA is now being covered by media spaces that did not treat the league as a priority before Caitlin Clark changed the attention economy. That is what happens when a sport becomes more visible. New outlets show up because there is traffic, audience demand, and conflict. The uncomfortable truth for the league is that Caitlin Clark did not only bring fans who already agreed with the league's culture. She brought casual sports fans. She brought critics. She brought people who had never watched a full WNBA game. She brought people who watch men's sports, political commentary, debate shows, gambling content, culture war content, and highlight channels. Some of those viewers are going to love the league. Some are going to attack it. Some are going to buy tickets and still criticize the commissioner. Some are going to cheer Clark and boo everyone else. That is messy, but it is also attention. And once Sophie Cunningham became part of the story, the audience widened again. She is being framed by supporters as a player with the courage to speak on women's sports. That framing makes her more than a role player in the discourse. It gives her a fan base that is not only about points, assists, or minutes. It is about identification. People see her as taking a stand, and when fans feel represented, they do not just watch, they defend. That is what the league has to decide how to handle. Does it treat these fans as unwanted outsiders, or does it accept that a mainstream league cannot demand ideological uniformity from its audience? Because if the WNBA wants to be a national sports property, it has to deal with the same thing every national sports property deals with. Fans who argue, fans who disagree, fans who question the league office, fans who dislike certain reporters, fans who support certain players for reasons that go beyond the box score. The worst response is selective control, because selective control makes the league look smaller than the moment. It makes it look like the WNBA wants the benefits of being mainstream without the pressure of being mainstream, and the pressure is the price.
You obviously have a superstar in your league, and yeah, Sophie's a superstar now, who is resonating with a completely new fan base. Isn't that what... Look, the league literally went from one superstar to two superstars. That's how you grow a league. And I don't want to hear about Asia. I don't want to hear about Angel. I don't want to hear about Paige. Stop it. They ain't not a three. None of the three making national news about nothing.
The final claim in the clip is that the league now has two stars driving national attention, Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. That is debatable, depending on how someone defines superstardom, but the larger point is clear. Clark is the engine of the league's attention boom, and Sophie has become a major controversy figure inside that same boom. That distinction matters. Caitlin Clark's power is built on performance, records, highlights, ticket demand, broadcast interest, and the feeling that every game could become a moment. Sophie Cunningham's current wave is different. It is built around attitude, conflict, identity, and her willingness to be attached to a polarizing conversation. Those are not the same kind of fame, but both can move attention, and that is why this story is so explosive. It merges the WNBA's biggest basketball attraction with one of the most divisive cultural debates in sports. It places coaches in the middle. It places PR staff in the middle. It places reporters in the middle. It places fans in the middle. And every attempted escape becomes another clip. The league may want the conversation to return to basketball, and that is understandable. The players put real work on the floor. Teams are fighting for wins. Coaches are trying to manage rotations. Fans who just want the game are tired of every headline turning into a political fight. But the league also cannot pretend it has no role in how these stories keep growing. When a press conference ends at the exact moment a sensitive question begins, people will notice. When coaches answer with corporate caution, people will notice. When a player is booed because of what she represents, people will notice. When supporters show up in the arena, people will notice. So now the Fever and the WNBA have a choice. They can keep trying to insulate the product from the audience that growth has brought them, or they can accept that the audience is bigger, louder, more divided, and more powerful than before. And that is where I want to put the question to you. Was the Fever right to shut that moment down and keep the focus on basketball? Or did they expose exactly why people think the league only wants approved questions from approved voices? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like if you want more straight commentary on stories like this, and subscribe before the next controversy proves this one was not an accident.